Hey everybody, Steve back, and I've got a cool tutorial for you, and this is going to be all geometry nodes based. We're going to use some shortest edge paths, but the big thing here we're going to be working with is going to be the boolean modifiers, which are built directly in to the geometry nodes graph. Okay, so we're going to jump in and we're going to do something that looks like the Terminator portal setup here, because that's pretty cool. I like that. And then we're going to kind of play around with this thing, and I'll show you a few different ways to achieve some really cool camera looks. And then I'm kind of rendering out one little test scene right now. So let's jump right in. All right, so let's go ahead and set up our scene. I'm just going to do a vertical split and throw this into Geometry Nodes workspace. You can drop anything you want over here and click new. Now we're going to set up the node graph first off. So the first thing I really want to do is put in a mesh boolean, and then the base geometry, we can cut that off for now, and let's grab two UV sphere setups. All right, and I'll just shift D and make a copy of that, and straight away I'm just going to go ahead and start doing some organization, so I don't have to do a whole lot of cleanup at the end. And this will be green for our original geometry, okay? And so one of these can tag in to mesh 1, and mesh 1 is what you're going to be cutting, and mesh 2 is the actual cutter itself. Now what we're going to want to do is take this one from difference to union, and you'll see everything's going to come back. And so let's throw in a transform geo right here. Kind of spread this out, and when you switch this to union, it's going to knock that off, so you'll have to put it back, and I think that looks pretty good. And so if we do this with the transform, we'll see that we have control over these inside of the union as it is. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to shift D and make a copy of this mesh boolean here, and we're going to switch this one to difference so that it via proximity cuts the floor out for us, and then with the proximity we'll use that to actually lift the floor up and down. All right, so we'll be pulling out the geometry here from the second UV sphere from the transform, okay, and that one is going to feed into the cutter, and then our original is going to feed into mesh 1. And you won't see anything happen just yet, no big deal. What I want to do is I want to get a proximity, a geo proximity, and I'll go ahead and put that here. And we're going to have to build out a little bit of math and then tie it into a set position node. And the set position node is going to help us achieve the proximity on the floor. All right, so I want to use the distance out of the geometry proximity, but that is a float. That's a single value, and I was going to plug it in to the offset, and that's a vector, and that's going to be an X, Y, Z. And so I need to combine these, so I'll type in a combine X, Y, Z vector, and I just want to plug in the distance to the Z calculation. So that's how the floor is going to go up and down. And now I'm going to need something to control this, so I'll drop in a math. I'll set it to multiply. I want to drag this value, and I'm going to drag it right to the output over here, so that way we have a value output. And we could rename this as well, so it doesn't have to say value. This can be floor control, and that looks good. Also, a few other things here. The segment count for both UV spheres need to be synchronized. And in order to do that, all we have to do is output the segments one time, grab the same output, and tag it into the segments here. So when I change the segments, they change together and they're perfectly synchronized. And that'll keep the geometry looking nice. All right, now if we want some extra control on the outside for this, for the scaling of the size of this, so we don't have to come back in here, we could do this in the viewport very easily. So I'll just grab an empty sphere, I'll scale it up just a touch and apply that scale. I'm going to lock the workspace so it doesn't go away when I click on something else. Now that I've got this selected, I can drag the empty in, and I'm going to put that with the transform here, and all I'm going to do is plug in the location, rotation, and the scale to the respective ports here so you can see how that is. And now if I come over here and try to scale this, it's going to scale it up the way I need it. And I'm going to clean this up real quick. Something like that. Now the problem is I can't actually see what I'm looking at, so I need another transform. So I'm just going to Shift D and drop that in to get that one back. And now I can kind of bring this up or down however I need to kind of get this to work. And I think that looks pretty good. And it looks like somehow I knocked some of this stuff off. No big deal. So I'm going to need the mesh boolean difference to tag into the set position, first of all. And then this needs to output, the mesh boolean union needs to output to the target geometry. The transform geometry is best set to 0.14, and I'm actually going to move this ahead of the boolean and put it right here. And then I'll Control X and get rid of that. And so now we've got the option to hit G and Z and kind of move this thing up or down. And I think that opens up the floor for us pretty nice. And so that looks good. And then the floor control is kind of controlling everything right now, and we don't want that to happen. So we're going to drop in a couple of extrude nodes. And so when you drop these in, don't just do it. Kind of bring this size down to 0.001 or something like that, and then we can drop it in. And I'm going to drop in another one, and I want to control the top as the selection here, and I may bring this value up just a touch. And for the selection for that, or rather the offset, what I want to do is grab the combine XYZ vector output, and I want to tag this in for the offset. All right, I'm all about making things procedural and as non-destructive as possible. So let's clear a little space here. And what I want to do, if you hit T to get rid of this, that's so annoying. If you don't want the top there, if it's annoying perhaps, you can grab the transform and hit M to mute that, and everything should work as usual. Once you get into like extruding things a little bit more, you may get a little bit of a problem, but if you want, you can throw in a switch for this, and I'll just turn it back on. What we can do is for the transform, it will be false, and for the follow through, it'll be true. So if I turn this on or off, I'll now have a switch. And let me just drag this little boolean out over here. So now we've got that as an output over here. So you can turn the top off so you can kind of work on it. It does change the geometry a little bit, but I think it's going to work out nice. Now, another thing we want to do is let's throw in some wireframe stuffs and use some shortest edge paths to kind of make that nice final look. And this is going to be for the mesh boolean itself. So all we got to do is pull out a mesh to curve, and we'll just put this here, and then a curve to mesh. Nice simple stuff. And I'll just tag that in, and now I want a curve circle, and the curve circle is actually going to give us that wireframe look. Just make sure to drop this to 0.005 or something like that before you plug it in. And we're going to need a couple more things here. One is going to be a join geometry. So put that in here and tag that in. And now we've got a nice little wireframe right here, and it's pretty cool. But if you don't want to see it right there, what you can do is you can take the intersecting edges selection, and we can tag that right into the mesh to curve. And it's only going to show up in certain places. And it's better demonstrated if you can actually see that. So we'll throw in like a couple of materials. Just make sure they're like different colors, obviously, so you can kind of see what you got. One will be yellow and one will be blue. And so I'll grab the blue one for the wireframe here. And so if I remove this, there we go, and I'll come over and you kind of see how that's starting to look. And if you tag it back in, you'll see that it's just along the rim, and it isolates the edges of the boolean. That's all that's doing. It's no big deal. And if you don't see some of your work, make sure to turn on the self intersection and the hole tolerant if you don't see some of the work that you got going on. And I want to make sure that I can see all the ridges and valleys nicely, make it look a little bit more hard surface. And there are some bad areas here, so I don't like how that looks. We could probably do is tag in a delete geometry right here. We do have some bad geo, but that's because of the switch. It's not designed to be off as in like for your render. But if you want to clean that up a little bit, you can grab the edge. Let me just show you what I'm doing here. The Boolean intersecting edges, and you can drag this over. You can tag this into the selection, and that will definitely clean things up a little bit. And then I have fill caps on to kind of close in the gaps. And so that looks a little bit better. Now, just to do a little bit of maintenance here for the curved circle, the resolution can really be down to like 6. You see, it doesn't affect how that actually ends up looking too much. Maybe 8's a little bit better, and you can drag that out as a property as well and have that over here. And for some more cleanup, let's bring the ring count in. I'm going to tag in the ring count here and then double that and do the same thing. And so now I'm controlling the rings all at one time. All right, and things got a little shifted over here. So I had my wireframe just out a little bit, but I just came back over to the transform here and kind of play around with that until it gets right back where it's supposed to be. So something like 0.01 looks pretty good. And then you can scale this on the Z, and that will change everything as well. And that's another reason that I have that in there. So it kind of looks like an eggshell. You can change that a little bit. All right, so that's cool. And if you turn off the delete geometry, don't forget you'll get back that piece of wireframe there. And I want to move all of this up, and I'll hit Control J to grab that and move it out of the way. And then I'm going to box this up as well. And now what I want to do is I want to throw in the shortest path setup, and just a very basic setup. So what we'll do is just type in Shift-A-S, and let's grab an edge paths to curves. And I'm going to drag the extrude. So I want the main body. I want all of this to get the shortest path. And that way we can throw the wireframe on this and make it look really cool. And what we're going to need to do, and we can go ahead and drag this into the join, it doesn't matter. And now we need to grab a shortest edge path. Okay, and this one has a next on it, just like this one. And we're only going to be working with that. We're not going to mess with the start vertex. So you can go ahead and plug the next into the next. What we need to do is we need to tell the edge vertex what we need to do. So let's grab a Boolean math. And what we're going to do is with these outputs here, we're going to drag this out and we're going to type in equal. And this is going to give us a compare node. And you can actually Shift D, copy, and grab another compare node as we build this out. And this one could be greater than. It doesn't really matter. You kind of play around with the values. Now, in order to get the shortest path, and I've got a full tutorial on how to start out with the shortest edge path. So it'll give you a good like 15-20 minutes of in-depth on what it does and how it does it. So I won't do that here, but what we'll do is we're going to grab the index, and I will show you that if I don't think we can do it in geometry nodes. Yeah, you need a special thing to show the indices here. Yeah, because this isn't real meshed yet, and we're not really going to mess around with trying to achieve that in this one. So Shift-A-S, let's grab an index node, and you can just tag this in to both of the A inputs here, and you'll need to set a value. So if this is equal to 0, then it's going to show up. But if you bring it up to 1, then it obviously is going to show more, and anything greater than 1 is going to show. Now, in order to get any of that to show up, we're going to need to grab a couple more nodes. And let's go, because this is already a curve, so all we actually have to do is say curve to mesh, curve circle. Don't forget to change the radius. I'll put it 0.005. Let's go ahead and tag that in. And we'll come over here so we can actually see it. I'll put in a set material node here and pull in that blue color so we'll be able to see it. And so I'll just have something like 1 here, no big deal, and I'll put 1000 right there, and it still can't see anything. There's a little bit pulling up right around 1800. And so what I want to do is for the shortest path edge cost, I want to put in a random value. And that should give us that nice 0 to 1, so we can kind of come in here and kind of play around with this now. And that looks pretty cool. So don't forget, this is one of those things you can do. You come in here, you can add another material, and let's get rid of the principal BSDF, and let's drop in an emission. And if we come over here and look at scene lights and scene world, so everything's nice and dark. I'm going to come back over to the material, and I think we could make this any color, doesn't matter. And I'll turn the strength up a bit and then grab that. And so now we can kind of see what we've got here. That actually looks pretty cool. And if you want to get a nice little gradient effect, and don't forget to save your work as you go. Let me zoom out. And I just know I've got the emission since that's what's selected here. What we can do is we can pull this thing out, and let's put in a color ramp. And the color ramp is going to give us the option to add in a few extra colors. And so I'm going to get rid of black, and I'll make it blue. I'm going to get rid of this white, and I'll make it like an orange. And we don't see them all yet, so let's drag the factor out and type in mapping for mapping vector, and then we're going to get the blue. So now let's pull this vector out and type COOR, and that's just like giving you an automatic search box. It's pretty cool. I'm going to do object to vector, and then I get this neat little gradient effect, and you can kind of add whatever you want. Like if I want to add in maybe a few extra colors right there, pretty cool. I think you could also, and do I have that new Voronoi texture in this one? No, it's in 4.0. Or is this it? Who knows? Doesn't matter. I'm going to just take that and plug it in, and then kind of play around with the scale. It's not going to give me everything I ever wanted. That's okay. I'm going to get rid of that. My real goal was to drag a Musgrave texture in and tag that into the location, because I always get like a really cool result. And what you can do is you can 4D that, of course, and then you can animate that 4D value however you want. And that looks pretty good. And of course, you can change all these to get a myriad of different color results, however you want to do it. And you can play around with the scale and everything here too, and get some pretty cool gradients. All right, I got to shift back over to geometry node. Let's see, what else do we want to do here? I'm going to come back. All right, so now we've got that set up. So it's just good to understand Let me come back over here. You know how this is going to work. So the floor control, you can go up and down with that. I do want to mess around with the extrudes for a moment. If we go to individual, you'll get that neat little blocky staircase look that I had in the beginning. And then the extrude, kind of bring it down a little bit, and let's let the math control that for the floor control. So that way it's not pushing the roof up too high. I think that looks pretty cool. And then the segment count, it's kind of endless. You can make some really, really cool things. And then I could play around with the ring count as well and get some varying different looks. And the wireframe is all there. And so as we kind of build this out, you can see, let me get rid of that. There we go. Now we can kind of see this a little bit better. I kind of like how that looks. And there you go. That's about it. You kind of have some fun with that. I do have my LM Studio in here, so I just find this to be the easiest way to do this. So I could just throw in a camera, make it the active, bring it down, Control-Alt-C will zoom that in for me. And if I had any lights in the scene, I could control those as well, and then add some depth of field and have some fun with it. Anyways, that's it. I hope this was somewhat educational. It's a neat little procedural way of getting some kind of cool results. And don't forget, you can pull out any of these values, including this extrude, and you can tag all of those in. And then if you want to make this at some point in the future, grab all this and hit Control-G and then Tab. And come over here. This is just called node group. So you would want to come in here where it says node group, and you could rename this to whatever you want. I could just call this the extrude floor mod. All right, and then jump back over here. And now I've got the extrude floor mod, and probably just go back here and then right click and mark that as an asset and save that in my asset folder, so for later I can just dump that in anytime I want. If you guys want my original blend file, I will throw that up on the Gumroad, so you can just go grab that free. And I do want to demo out real quick, like a little, let's see, I'll move that off and hide it. And if you haven't seen this yet, you didn't quite catch what I was doing, I've been working on the B-Box mod. I'm just going to Shift D that and bring it up and scale it. And I've got the B-Box here, which is working pretty cool. And it's going to do is it's going to automatically throw in a geometry nodes group for you. And it looks like I didn't need that extra cube. Cool. So what this is a procedural bevel with a bunch of different profiles, all based on geometry nodes. And so as you come over here, and I'll just join that because that's like it's just a little piece there. It's annoying. So you could change bevel types, type 1 and type 2. Let me switch that off. So type 1 and type 2, and you kind of play around with it. It's got a shade smooth. You turn it on or off. It comes with some preset colors. Why is my background? Let's turn all that off. There we go. And comes with some colors, so you can kind of see if you have shading errors. I think it's a little bit deceptive because I don't believe there's any shading errors there, you know, but it's just going to have to look at it and kind of test it out. And so it comes with a subdivide if you want to subdivide it. It has a bevel total, so as you're kind of moving this around, you can change how it looks, turn it a little bit less of a bevel, more into a chamfer, and that's the bevel total. The bevel type, and you have a smoothing factor, which some of this is only going to work for the second one. So type 1 and type 2, and type 1 controls are up here, and type 2 controls are mostly down here. And so now you could come in and you could start working the profiles and changing how that looks, which is pretty cool. So I bring the smoothing up or down, and you get like pretty much a real bevel through geometry nodes. And they've got a neat little offset scale that's going to probably drive you crazy if you get it out. So you might not want to mess with the profiles. They're kind of preset, but you can to achieve some different looks. And this one is over on the Gumroad as well. Let's move this around. As you can see, it adapts. So it's an adaptive setup, but like both bevel types won't maybe work on one surface. So you're going to have to kind of play around with these profiles to see which one's going to work best for you. And let's see here. The bevel total. Trying to get this thing to go back the way I had it. There we go. So that looks pretty good. It's a little bit of a pain, but once you figure it out, you can make some very, very good and very fun, clean bevels, and it'll basically bevel anywhere you put it, which is pretty cool. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. See y'all in the next one. Happy